Good morning. Thank you very much for being here. I'm proud to stand here today side by side with women leaders in our city as we recognize Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Domestic Violence Awareness Month isn't just a time for reflection, it's a time for action. When 1 in 4 women and 1 in 7 men will experience intimate partner violence, we cannot ignore the problem. So I want to make it very clear to all those listening, we believe you, we support you, and you are not alone. It's shameful how prevalent domestic violence is, not just throughout our country, but here in Los Angeles. For the past 5 years, LAPD has consistently received around 48,000 domestic violence calls a year for service. So no matter what they say, why don't you just leave? It's not that easy. It's bigger than that. It's self-doubt, it's manipulation, it's guilt, it's shame, and the belief that this is the last time. Sometimes the victims don't have another choice but to think this way. Domestic violence creates a devastating ripple effect throughout the survivor's life. People who have experienced domestic violence are the largest subpopulation of those experiencing homelessness, making up 40% of the city's homeless population. 40%. That's almost equal to veterans and those experiencing substance and mental illness combined. The status quo is failing Angelinos. So if we are truly a city who wants to end homelessness, we need to address the domestic violence issue in our country, in our city, as part of the solution. This is why it's so important to create a safe space for people who can leave their abusive homes. Last year, as a result of the Safer at Home order, LAPD received a daily 12.7 increase in DV-related calls compared to before March of 2020. On any given day in California, 1,000 people are turned away from a domestic violence shelter due to lack of space. As a city, we are committed to supporting survivors, which is why the COVID-19 pandemic, we allocated $6 million to support the Project Safe Haven. The Project Safe Haven served 3,000 Angelinos during one of the most uncertain times in our country's history. This program essentially tripled the amount of domestic violence and human trafficking beds here in LA County. And to further our investment, we are here to announce the launch of the Survivors First program. This program will fund 10 existing LA-based nonprofit shelter agencies and be the first city-dedicated permanent housing program for survivors of domestic violence and human trafficking. When I came to the City Council, I recognized an area that needed attention and dedicated resources, where women and families were not falling through the cracks. This is why, starting when I was sitting on the Budget and Finance Committee and now as City Council President, this city has increased the domestic violence shelter budget by over 500% for the first time in the city's history. This has also included a redesign of domestic violence shelter programs to increase shelter beds and adding human trafficking shelter component, which is the only one of its kind in the county and in the country. I recognize that the process that we've made is great, but I also recognize that there's so much more to do. The Survivors First program has been funded through the CARES Act money and is modeled after the National Housing First program. This model has proven to be most effective to make sure that housing survivors stay housed, with 96% of its participants remained housed after 18 months of participating in the program. I want to thank Abigail Marquez, the General Manager of the new Community Investment for Families Department, for implementing and overseeing this program. Abigail, you really have been essential to making sure that we are making progress and that no survivor is forgotten. Where's Abigail? Right behind me. And I also want to thank the City's Domestic Violence Alliance for your tireless work in continuing to advocate for survivors. Rainbow Services Executive Director Elizabeth Eastland, for your support as we all work towards the same goal, ending domestic violence and ending human trafficking. And before I introduce Elizabeth Eastland, I know there's three camera here crews from Spanish media, so I'll just say a few words in Spanish as well. Estoy orgullosa de estar aquí para la llamada de las mujeres líderes de nuestra ciudad para reconocer el mes de conciencia en contra de la violencia doméstica. El mes se enfoca en la violencia en el hogar, pero no solamente es una reflexión, tenemos que tomar acción para poder resolver este problema. Cuando 1 en 4 mujeres y 1 en 7 hombres experimentan violencia en su casa, este es un problema mucho más grande. Así que quiero ser muy clara, no todas las personas pueden dejar sus abusadores, hay muchísima reflexión, muchísima culpa, entonces antes de que esas personas puedan dejar sus hogares, y mucha vergüenza asociada con este problema. La violencia en el hogar es una epidemia, no nomás en este país, pero en nuestra ciudad. Las personas que han vivido con ese tipo de violencia es una subpoblación más grande que las personas que están experimentando problemas con las drogas y problemas mentales. Son casi el 40% de las personas que viven sin hogar en nuestras calles. Tenemos que hacer mucho más para poder solucionar este problema, pero para que las personas que estén lidiando con una situación en sus casas tengan dónde ir, un techo, donde puedan convertir y llevar a sus hijos para que tengan un hogar fuera de la violencia. Este año pasado, como resultado de la orden de quedarse en sus casas durante la pandemia, aumentó el 12.7% de llamadas relacionadas con llamadas de violencia doméstica al Departamento de Policía. Como ciudad tenemos que hacer algo y estamos aquí para anunciar el lanzamiento de un nuevo programa que se llama Survivors First. Este programa va a financiar 10 agencias que existen basados en ayudar a personas que están relacionadas con este problema. Survivors First ha sido financiado a través del CARE Act, que es dinero federal, y es un modelo de programa nacional para que puedan crear vivienda para las personas que son víctimas de la violencia doméstica. Este programa ha tenido muchísima participación, no nomás en este país, pero queremos lanzar un programa así en nuestra ciudad, donde sabemos que el 96% de los participantes que están viviendo en esas viviendas se quedan viviendo en esas viviendas por más de 18 meses. Quisiera agradecer a todos los que están aquí, a las mujeres detrás de mí que están constantemente luchando en contra de la violencia doméstica y creando programas para que las mujeres y las familias tengan un lugar sano donde vivir. Con eso quisiera introducir a Elizabeth Eastland, que también nos va a decir unas cuantas palabras. Muchísimas gracias. Elizabeth.
Good morning, everybody. Oh, let me take off my mask. Good morning, everyone. My name's Elizabeth Eastland. I'm the Executive Director of Rainbow Services. Rainbow provides shelter and support services to anyone impacted by domestic violence, empowering them to move beyond the trauma and towards safety and stability. I want to thank Council President Martinez for having me here today and for your tireless efforts to advocate for the needs of women and girls and to really center their voices in our work. I am also super grateful to Abigail Marquez and the whole Community Investment for Families Department for your tireless efforts to make survivor housing a reality today. I've been asked to speak to you about the prevalence of domestic violence and homelessness. Homelessness and domestic violence are intricately linked. DV is a primary driver of homelessness for women. Studies show that as many as 57% of all homeless women report domestic violence as the immediate cause of their homelessness. Survivors must often choose between staying in an abusive home or becoming homeless. Once survivors decide to leave, a DV emergency shelter is often the safest option. Sadly, there is extremely limited capacity to meet the magnitude of need in our city, which often leaves survivors with even fewer safe housing options. When half of the women experiencing homeless in Los Angeles County, our county, have experienced domestic violence, we know there is still work to be done. Often, when there is a high prevalence directly related to any social issue within a population, it causes concern and horror. Where is that concern for survivors? Rainbow has had enormous success with the DV Housing First program, of which Survivor First is modeled. DV Housing First provides flexible financial assistance that is survivor-driven and trauma-informed. A statewide evaluation in 2019 found that the use of this innovative model, 58% of survivors were able to prevent homelessness and find and maintain safe, permanent housing. Survivor Housing First provides access to permanent housing while continuing the supportive services that are often critical to survivors' healing. I am so proud that our city is the first major city, to my knowledge, to invest in this housing model on this scale, specifically for survivors, and also to be inclusive of survivors of sexual assault and human trafficking. In doing so, we are able to continue expanding safe housing options for survivors. With these funds, Los Angeles joins a growing number of other communities across the country that are embracing a commitment to survivor-driven, trauma-informed housing services and the flexible financial assistance that supports survivors' pathways to safe housing. These programs work. We can, do, and will continue to prevent homelessness for survivors when we have the support and the funding to do so. As Project Safe Haven showed us during the pandemic, with more funding, we can serve more survivors. We urge the city to continue to support flexible funding through the Survivor Housing First model. We would prefer multi-year funding if possible, and I'm sure my colleagues would want me to say that. And we need to continue prioritizing survivors for housing vouchers. We hope that the County of Los Angeles is listening, and we look forward to partnering with you as well. One more note on the intersection of DV and homelessness. When you look at the homeless population in general, there is so many stories of trauma and abuse starting from early childhood. This is an issue that cannot be unlinked. We need to start addressing domestic violence and poverty and a lot of other things, and then we can start really truly housing our unhoused neighbors. To all survivors, we see you, we hear you, we invite you to join us and use your voice as we work to establish more safe, permanent housing options for survivors. Please check out the Los Angeles City Domestic Violence Alliance, the Los Angeles County Domestic Violence Council, or join us with the DV Homeless Services Coalition to get involved in this critical work. If you need domestic violence support, if you're struggling in an unhealthy relationship, please reach out to the National Domestic Violence Hotline, or you can call Rainbow's 24-hour bilingual hotline at 310-547-9343. I really appreciate being able to share with you today, and thank you for your time. It is my great honor to introduce Nikki Brown. Nikki is an attorney serving some of the most vulnerable Angelenos, people living near or in poverty and experiencing domestic violence. A survivor herself, Nikki sees our bodies as sites of personal resistance and envisions what the world would be like absent influences of colonialism, white supremacy, and all the attendant isms, a world in which pleasure, health, safety, freedom, and love are sacred for each of us. Welcome, Nikki.
Good morning, everyone. As I look around this space and see all the powerful people who've done this soulful and important work of prioritizing survivors, our safety, our ability to remain at peace and in homes and in the workplace and in the lives that we imagined for ourselves. I remember that 1 in 4 number, that 1 in 4 of us who are women have experienced intimate partner violence. And I'm one of those 4. And I thought I was not supposed to be one of those 4. I have fancy degrees. I have great friends. And nobody ever approached me with violence as a child. But yet here I was 4 years ago, having managed to survive 10 years with an abuser and having become completely isolated and having become absolutely flattened by financial abuse, I decided I wanted to leave, and I did. Downside was I'm a person without children, and I called shelter after shelter and got lots of great support. I got safety planning at Rainbow, and I got eventually some support getting back housed at Rainbow. One of the things I'm very excited that this initiative may provide is the opportunity for people like me who may otherwise have ended up, as I did, in a homeless shelter that wasn't a confidential location, that didn't have wraparound services, that didn't have therapy, that didn't have anyone to look out for me or safety plan with me when my abuser found me there. I stayed there for 90 days. And during that time, I was in constant communication with the staff at Rainbow, who not only provided me with therapy and group support, and from time to time, just physical objects if I needed. I have some beautiful items in my wardrobe because I left with 8 dresses and 2 pairs of shoes. And the tears that I felt when I was told at Rainbow, hey, we'll help you. We'll go with you to look for an apartment. We'll support you in paying that first, last, and security that I didn't have money for. I couldn't believe anybody would do that for me, and I'm so excited that more women will have that moment. And that wasn't the end of it, because what happens is life happens. We get back in housing, and hopefully everything goes really smoothly, but what happens? Your transmission goes. Your dog has to go to the vet. And those are things that happen to me. And so I called and I was like, I don't know what to do. My transmission is gone. I finally got a job. I can't get to work to pay for the rent for the place that I'm renting so I can continue this life. And I thought I was going to end up unhoused again. One of the most important parts of having a survivor-focused and trauma-informed program with flexible spending was that they were able to take care of my transmission. I'm still driving that car, and I tell you that was 4 years ago. So it was a good investment. I am honored and pleased and grateful for all of our work. I am incredibly proud of our city, and I'm hopeful that more and more survivors will find themselves met in the ways that I was. I thank you all for your work. I thank you for your dedication. I thank you for your passion. And I have the incredible honor of introducing Ms. Abigail Marquez. She's the General Manager of the City of Los Angeles Community Investment for Families Department. Ms. Marquez has spent 17 years working for the City of Los Angeles, advancing anti-poverty programs and policies. She was recently appointed by the mayor and the city council to serve as the general manager of the newly created Community Investment for Families Department. Prior to this appointment, Ms. Marquez served as Assistant General Manager of the Los Angeles Housing and Community Investment Department, overseeing Community Services and Development Bureau. In that role, she was responsible for the planning and administration of the city's consolidated plan, which includes $120 million in federal funds to support capital projects and neighborhood improvement programs, and the implementation of the department's social service delivery systems, family source, domestic violence, human trafficking shelter operations, and housing opportunities for persons with HIV and AIDS. In this role, Ms. Marquez also worked with staff to provide strategic direction to the Bureau's 4 commissions: the Commission on Community and Family Services, Community Action Board, Domestic Violence Alliance, and Affordable Housing Commission. During her tenure, she played a significant role in helping to increase the domestic violence and human trafficking shelter budget. She implemented several key COVID response programs and managed the allocation of increased federal funding, and all allocated through the CARES Act. As General Manager of the Community Investment for Families Department, Ms. Marquez will work closely with the Mayor and City Council to establish poverty reduction goals for the city, will play an active role in implementing homelessness prevention programs, oversee the implementation of Los Angeles Guaranteed Basic Income Pilot, Los Angeles Guaranteed Basic Income Pilot, the largest in the nation, and implement the Children's Savings Account Program, Opportunity LA, which supports 35,000 first graders annually across the region. Morning. Thank you. Take your plate.
All good stuff.
I nod because all of that, I always feel like that's my working bio. You know, I am here as a committed public servant, and I am honored to be among this incredible group of women leaders who are leading with tenacity, with conviction, and they're just relentless in the advocacy for, in this case, lifting up the voices of survivors of domestic violence and intimate partner violence. So again, it's my honor to be here. I feel that so much of what I was going to say has already been said. I am very proud to be leading the newly created Community Investment for Families Department. Our goal is to break the cycle of generational poverty. We have two systems that we manage, the Family Source system, which includes 16 organizations that serve people who are on the brink of homelessness oftentimes, people who are living check to check. And we're trying to break that cycle of sometimes economic abuse, and we're helping to provide them with the support and the case management services that they need. And we do this in partnership with 16 organizations. We also oversee the domestic violence and human trafficking shelter system, which includes 10 organizations that provide both emergency and transitional shelter-based services to survivors. We are very, very proud of the program that we're announcing today, because what it's doing is creating other options and the flexibility that that our organizations need to be able to respond to the variety of issues that emerge as they are providing services to victims and survivors of domestic violence and human trafficking. This is modeled, as was said, after a national program, a state program, and we're bringing it to scale in the city of Los Angeles by providing the support that is needed to all of the organizations that we fund. It's also modeled after Project Safe Haven, which was mentioned. And Project Safe Haven is a program that is similar to Project Room Key, in that it was focused on survivors who were fleeing, and you heard already the staggering statistics, who were fleeing domestic violence early on during the Safer at Home order. The city was able to negotiate contracts or agreements with hotels where we were able to house survivors. The program housed, during the course of a 10-month period, housed close to 3,000, provided shelter to close to 3,000 survivors. And what is really remarkable is that we were able to transition I would say 97% into alternative housing. And that is what we're trying to do with this program, is provide, again, that additional support. Shelter is not for everyone. And you've heard, shelter is also at capacity oftentimes. So what we need is that flexibility. So I will end with just saying that I appreciate, Nikki, your courage, your resiliency. Thank you for being here, for being our advocate today, and for being the voice that is so critical for us to hear. I have to just give so much acknowledgement to the council president, Nury Martinez. All of what I have done is because she has been the leader that is making all of this happen. And the one story that I always share is that when the council president at the time was council member on the Budget and Finance Committee is when all of this started to shift. And I want everyone to recognize that, because she brought the voice, her own perspective, and her own leadership on the Budget and Finance Committee. And that was the year that we were redesigning the domestic violence shelter system, and we increased that budget And we have made huge gains. We are now at 500%, as was mentioned. But we are still just getting started. Back then, we were funding the DV system at $13 per night per bed, 1-3. And Council President Martinez changed that. She made an investment in increasing the funding for domestic violence and created the very first in the country human trafficking shelter system. And that's because she listened. And that's one of the things I want to emphasize is that we also listen. We may not always have the answers, but I want to thank you, Elizabeth, because I listened to you. You came into my office when I started this job, when I was the assistant general manager, and you said, we need to change this. We need to increase the budget for survivors. And I then shared that story with the council president, and things started to happen. So I just want to say thank you to the council president, thank you to Elizabeth, thank you to Amy, who's here, and the members of the Domestic Violence Alliance for your advocacy and for your support. And of course, thank you to the CIFD team, who is tremendous, who is both in front and behind the scenes making things happen. So I will then turn it back over to the council president in case there's any questions. Shh.
Acabas de decir, amiga, y algo bien importante, que hay demasiada gente en los hogares de ayuda. Esta podría ser una solución.
Sí, este programa ofrece una solución. Los shelters, I don't know how to say shelter. Sí, albergues, a veces ya no tienen capacidad de poder ayudar porque ya no tienen la capacidad. Este programa ayuda a dar más opciones a las organizaciones que están apoyando a las personas que sufren por la violencia doméstica. Puede ayudarlo a moverla a un apartamento y pagar la renta por un mes, el depósito de la renta. Y lo más importante es que el programa sigue ayudando a la persona. No solamente la va a mover o lo va a mover a una vivienda, sino va a seguir ayudando a la persona. Y esa es la diferencia de este programa. Como habló Nikki, ella ya estaba en un hogar, pero su carro no estaba funcionando. Entonces ese programa pudo seguir ayudando, a darle ese apoyo para que ella pueda seguir con su trabajo, para poder mantener esa vivienda. Sure. What's really remarkable about Survivors First is that it provides the flexibility for the agencies that are on the ground providing the services to survivors of domestic violence and human trafficking and intimate partner violence. Shelter is, oftentimes at capacity, as we've heard, and so this is giving, it's another tool in the toolbox for the organizations. If their shelter is at capacity, they can put them in, or if they may not need shelter. Shelter is also not for everyone, and we need to recognize that. So what we're doing is we're creating more options to be able to address the very critical needs of this population. We can place them immediately in housing, pay their security deposit, and also continue to support them along the way, which I also want to emphasize is a very important distinction of this program. So we're not just going to place them in housing and then walk away. We're going to continue to provide the case management services and continue to support them in their journey towards healing.
How much money is being allocated to the Survivors program? How long will it last?
The council president, through her role as the chair of the ad hoc committee, allocated $5 million to support this program. It's being funded through the Community Development Block Grant through the CARES Act, and it is a pilot program for 1 year. We are hoping, we do have a research partner that is on board that is providing an independent evaluation of this program and the success. Again, we've seen success already in other models. 97% have transitioned into alternative housing. So we're hoping to replicate that and show and integrate this program into our permanent service delivery system. Absolutely. The program is open to both men and women and transgender individuals as well, to all individuals. Mi nombre es Abigail Márquez y soy la gerente del Departamento de Inversión para Familias.
That's good. Inversión para familia. Thank you very much.